Welcome to Confirmation Bias, presented by the League Ambassadors.
I'm Ambassador Kenny Ken, and the only reason why we're talking about MLS is because Ambassador Junior Blue is a real estate agent. Hit him up at lessismorerealtor@gmail.com. That's my confirmation bias.
I'm Ambassador Junior Blue, and I'd like to thank Kenny Ken for that plug. And that's my confirmation bias.
Oh, shit. I'm Ambassador Dad, and Anthony Jaworski is my favorite soccer player, and that's my confirmation bias.
I would like to give up my time back to Les so he can tell us what his Gmail is again. No, really.
My Gmail is lessismorerealtor@gmail.com.
He works hard for you.
Email's clever.
Thank you, sir.
And that's my confirmation bias.
Wow. Well, as the other real estate agent in the group, I would say if American soccer is as interesting as American politics, sign me up for some of that. And that's my confirmation bias.
I just feel bad now.
Welcome to Confirmation Bias, hosted by two real estate agents and the League Ambassadors. Kevin, what's your email address? If you want a house on the East Coast, hit up Kevin. Kevin, what's your email address?
It is info@johnsonsolutions.org.
All right. Kevin on the East Coast and Les on the West Coast. As a reminder, though, back to show business, you can follow us everywhere at social media at The League AM. That's Twitter, Facebook. Our YouTube channel is League Ambassadors. Visit our website, theleagueam.com. Also, if you are a diehard sports fan and you have something to say, please check out the diplomatic community portion of our website. I am excited for today's show. Bittersweet. This is the last show where we will have Diplomat Anthony Jaworski, but we have enjoyed having him, and thank you so much. Today we're going to talk about MLS, not multiple listing services, but the Major League Soccer, American football. And before actually Anthony gets into that, we have some show business that we need to handle. As we said earlier on our first episode with Anthony, he actually was our winner for our NCAA tournament challenge. Omar, please hand him his winnings. And then also before you start, Anthony, please give the audience your social media handles, your phone number if you want, whatever information.
Yeah, it's Jaws1230 is my Instagram. You can find me there, or on Facebook at Anthony Jaworski.
All right. And then are you single?
Not currently.
Okay, so we won't go there. Do you like your job?
Love my job.
Okay, there we go. Well, that's all we got for you. Anthony, it's all yours, baby. Talk to us a little bit about the history of MLS.
Cool. Well, thank you for having me back once again. I still don't know how to take Kevin's comment with the politics and the MLS comparison, right? If they're that disinteresting. No, I'm only kidding. Yeah, so some background here on the MLS. It's kind of interesting the way the MLS started out, because they actually started in 1988 when FIFA awarded them the World Cup to be hosted in the United States of America. As a condition of having them host the World Cup, they were required to begin a Premier League or a Division I soccer league in the United States. So it's kind of interesting. Just briefly touching on it, prior to that, there was a league, the NASL, that was held in the mid-'60s to the mid-1980s. It ended up collapsing. They won that bid for the World Cup. 94 was the World Cup. And then in 1996 is when the MLS started and kicked off. Started small. Started with just 10 teams. They did things a little bit differently than your kind of stereotypical European leagues. They, for instance, they do have a playoff in the MLS where, as you know, and from last week's episode, the English league, has their champion at the end of the year. Whoever has the most points wins that league. If they have to go into a point differential playoff, they will. Whereas the MLS has a 12-team playoff. 6 from each conference. There's a Western Conference and an Eastern Conference, and they'll do that playoff until the champion is determined. Their season's a little bit different as well. They run from spring to fall, so they'll have generally a March to about October, November schedule, and then their playoffs will run into December, actually, so it goes pretty late into the winter for that. They do stick out in different ways as well, where they do not have a promotion and relegation system.
Okay.
So that's very different from the European soccer leagues. And that's mainly because the MLS is kind of its own entity where they do not coincide with other leagues within the United States. So there are different soccer leagues that the U.S. has other than the MLS. They have a 2nd tier and a 3rd tier, just like the English league, as we discussed last week. But they're not affiliated. So you won't have that promotion or relegation come into play.
When you talk about the different tiers, Anthony, is it one of those things where you have to try out in order to determine if you can qualify to play for the MLS? Like, how do they determine who's Division I? Like you talked about, the agreement with FIFA was that they had to create like a premier Division I type. How do they determine who falls into that?
That's a great question. And it's interesting, too, because they do have an MLS draft, like in professional sports, where in Europe they don't have that.
Right.
They do have now developmental leagues where they didn't have that years ago either. Those are kind of new as well. So and if you remember last week I said, or 2 weeks ago when I said Messi was recruited at, 13 or something I had mentioned, right? Up until about 10 years ago, they didn't have any type of youth system for these teams. So now they're starting to implement youth systems where, the Red Bulls have an under-12 division. So they can actually monitor these kids growing up, see how they do, and if they want to advance them to a 2nd team or a 1st team.
Wow, when did that start?
Which would have killed Freddie Adu's whole career.
Oh, my goodness. The Biggie Smalls. Right?
That's funny.
But it's definitely true. That started about 10 years ago, I believe.
Okay.
And it's great to see because you see these differences between the leagues, right? You're like, why is in Europe the soccer so great, and here it's just like, they almost get thrown into this league right after college. They don't have that developmental system where now they do. So it's kind of cool to see that they're starting to start these players at such a young age. But yeah, a few other differences. They have a mid-break all-star game. You're not going to see that in Europe either. So I'm just kind of listing some contrast between the two. But basically what that consists of is the best players in the MLS combined to form an all-star team. And then they will play against a top-flight club in Europe. I think the last one was like Tottenham or something like that.
So it's not against each other.
It's not. Okay. And there's been talk about that too. They're like, well, they're getting these players in, these high-quality players now, where they didn't 10 years ago, right? But now they have the high-level players in the MLS, so they're starting to get them. So they're starting to kind of question that. Should we even be doing this? It's almost downplaying the league, right? Where we can't compete with them. So now we're getting these higher-profile players. It's like let's keep it within the MLS as opposed to playing against someone who we can't compete with, or we shouldn't be able to compete with, where we would need all-stars to compete with. So, yeah, and just like the other leagues, they do have something to play for within the league. The MLS, the team with the highest points at the end of the year qualifies for almost like a CONCACAF Champions League, so they have something to play for, even though they're playing for a playoff where maybe the third-place team ends up winning the championship. That first team with the most points will qualify for a tournament. And then they do play other tournaments. They have like the Gold Cup. There's a Canadian Cup as well that they will play in. So there are different tournaments and different kind of availability for leagues within the U.S. I mentioned that they do have the developmental system. You're going to see that, and then they'll get moved up to maybe their second division team. So you'll see the Red Bulls or the Galaxy, and then you'll in the MLS. But then in a lower division, they have the USL, which is soccer league, and there you'll see the Red Bulls too, the Galaxy too. Mm-hmm. So even though the leagues don't coincide where there's a relegation or promotion, they will still transfer players between those teams. So maybe they think a player that they brought up into the first division needs a little more experience. They'll drop him down to that Galaxy 2 team. Will they be able to get that experience and then get moved up to that first division or MLS team?
So it's like the D League?
Yeah,
like the NBA
again,
D-League?
yeah. And they didn't always have that. And I think that's kind of where I don't want to say discord, but like that difference in level of play kind of came in, you know what I mean? Because you have these guys developing, like I said, from 12, 13 years old in Europe, and then out here they're just starting to get that. So it's pretty promising to see that. So just kind of some numbers. It's been around for, I guess, 21 years now. There's been 10 different champions, the main one being the Galaxy with 5 titles. So they're kind of the dominant figure in the MLS right now. And that's just kind of some background on that. A little interesting fact, I don't know if you guys know this, when the MLS first started.
No, we don't.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely not.
It wasn't very profitable. It wasn't a popular league by any means. They did things a little bit differently. Like they had shootouts where you would start at midfield. If the game was in a tie, they would have shootouts at midfield where they'd have a shot clock, and they'd have to dribble one-on-one with the goalie to try and score, which was unheard of. No one's ever done that before.
You fucking up my questions.
Hey, honestly, he's killed like 4 questions.
He's killed 2 of mine.
All right, I'll keep it easy.
Cut that shit.
But no, I think it's kind of lost some or gained some popularity.
I was done
since
10
then.
minutes ago.
We about to be winging it for the last 15 minutes.
Oh no!
Oh, that's funny.
Hey, have you guys ever noticed in American sports when you're watching them on television? Let me ask you this: a little trivia for you. Do you ever notice that the home team is on the bottom or the right-hand side when sportscasting? It's not like that in Europe. You ever notice that? If you see a European soccer game, that home team will be on the left or on the top. And I remember being a little kid and seeing the MLS with the home team on the bottom. I'm like, that's not how they do it in soccer.
We drive on the right-hand side.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny.
But what's funny, too, is they switched it. Now they have them on the top.
Oh, really?
They're trying to adopt that style. So, that's some background without spoiling too many questions. So I apologize.
Well, let's start with our main question. So we, every time we do these shows on Thursday, we're focusing on non-mainstream sports. Our 3 primary questions, if you haven't been watching or listening to us in the past, is who's the Michael Jordan of said sport? Who's the Biggie Smalls of said sport, which Anthony addressed last week. We wanted to save our 3rd question for this week since we were talking about the MLS. And I think you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but why do you think that soccer hasn't really caught on in America? Like, what's the disconnect?
I think it is that youth system. Mm-hmm. If you've heard of players coming over here, his name's Andre Pirlo. He's an Italian soccer player that came over here toward the end of his career. He's still playing for NYCFC, and he just doesn't get. He's like, why is it so physical? Why is there so much running? Let the ball do all the work. You know what I mean? So they don't have the kind of technical ability that they do in Europe. And like I said, that comes from youth. You have these guys playing for their clubs since they were 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, knowing what they're going to do for the rest of their life. School's almost secondary at that point when they know that they're going to be professional. It's true. It's true. It really is.
It's like that here.
I mean, just for a different sport.
But yeah, I think with implementing these development leagues, I think it'll help a long way.
Okay. All right.
I've always had a question. Why is the women's national team ranked? I think they're number 2 in the world now, and the men's team is not in the top 20, and it's been like that for.
That's a great question. If you think about the kind of equality of women's sports dating back to not long, like even the 70s, right, when it was Title IX, you know what I mean? There really wasn't that equal opportunity almost. So that came into effect, I think, and especially even in Europe, their leagues for women are new as well. So I think here in the U.S., the physical aspect, the training aspect, the physicality of it all comes into play here more so than in Europe, where here you have women growing up, they're playing, they'll play softball, they'll play baseball, they'll play basketball, they'll play soccer. In Europe, they're really not playing all those sports. They might play soccer. And if you ever watch a soccer player who can play other sports, their footwork is usually pretty awesome.
Yep.
Hakeem
Olajuwon.
Olajuwon.
Steve
Yeah,
Nash.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? I think those other sports and those other training methods in the U.S. are a little bit different than those outside countries like in Europe or wherever.
Well,
So
that explains the women.
Right.
So what's wrong with us?
But that's interesting because if they love like overseas, they love American goalkeepers. And if you think about what I just said, they play these other sports growing up where they work on their footwork, they work on their hand movement, they work on their handwork. They love those keepers over there. They play these different sports that give them the agility that they don't get in Europe. They're not playing the baseball. They're not playing the football.
Which is why, is it Tim Howard?
Yeah.
That's why they, he's still making money over there, right?
He's actually here now, but that was just of last year that he moved over. He was playing for Manchester United.
Exactly.
I got to see him play, and it was amazing. I mean, the stuff that guy did. And he has Tourette's syndrome too, right?
Yes.
Looking like a little psycho.
Sit there talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Devin.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
I kind of wanted to draw a parallel or comparison of MLS specifically because it's here and indoor soccer league specifically because I remember growing up there used to be so many Baltimore Blast commercials and I was like, what the fuck is that? So like. Explain that, like the differences in the different types of indoor games.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to that. Growing up in New York, you start playing at a high level, like I said, around 13, 14. November rolls around and it's snowing. What are you going to do? So they have these indoor soccer leagues and indoor soccer facilities that are kind of the size of a hockey rink. There's different variations of indoor soccer. There's regular indoor soccer where you can play off the wall like a hockey rink, which is pretty cool. It's a fast-paced, high-skilled game, a lot of sprints, a lot of subbing. But then they also have futsal, which is a Brazilian-style soccer game with out of bounds that is indoors generally. And they play with a smaller weighted ball. So it's kind of more of a skilled sport. And to kind of touch on that a little bit, it's interesting because it's almost, like a flashy and one type of style where they can, flaunt their skills. But if you get these guys out to a big field that are playing on these futsal leagues, these indoor, it's a completely different game. So that's why you'll see guys kind of specifically going for these indoor leagues or these futsal leagues as opposed to the outside. Because if you get them on some grass in a 120-yard field, they're not going to do what they do in these.
So why does the skill set not correlate?
I mean, it does in some ways. I mean, definitely. Like I said, I played it. You know what I mean? It's a good way to get more touches on the ball. It's a smaller area. You're 3v3 or 5v5 as opposed to 11v11. So a lot of one-on-one stuff, which is fun. I love that. That was my favorite part of the game, is taking somebody one-on-one and being able to use the stuff that you practice. So I think that's where the differences are.
I don't know if you touched on it, but you didn't say the word academy. Is that what you meant by the lower levels?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Which MLS team has the best academy?
And I can't really answer that because they're so new, and I just haven't been around the academies yet. If I had to say one, I would guess the Galaxy, just because they're championships. But I can't even say that because they buy players as well. It's still kind of new, to be honest.
So that's their developmental league.
Exactly, though. Yep.
Okay. Is there a rivalry of any kind in Major League Soccer?
There are some rivalries. They're not really rooted too deeply, again, because it's kind of a new league. There are teams that have had history in previous leagues, as I mentioned, like the NASL, the North American Soccer League. Like I know Portland and Seattle both root from teams from that era that still have some bad blood between them. However, there are new rivalries. There's the interstate rivalries, such as the Red Bulls in New York and NYCFC. You know, you're going to get conflicting fans going to those games. You know, it's going to be a fun atmosphere. They're going to go at it. Same with like the San Jose Earthquakes and the LA Galaxy. You know, those interstate matchups really call for a good rivalry.
And LA has another team coming too, right?
Yeah, we are building. Kevin.
How would you describe parity in MLS? Like, are there like a few super teams that dominate every year, or does like the power shift like year to year?
That's a good question, and it kind of varied because in the beginning you had teams like DC United who were just killing it. I think they kind of fallen off since then. Galaxy is the dominant team with 5 championships in that 20-some-odd years.
Shout out to LA.
That's right. But they always have the good players there. They always pay for the high-ranked players. I think NYCFC is coming up a little bit. They're getting some high-quality players. But yeah.
All right. Question: the level of talent in the MLS. You have the Champions League is the number 1 league in Europe, correct?
The Champions League is the top teams from each league playing against each other.
Okay, so where would the MLS rank? Because they get relegated to lower levels, correct? Where would the MLS rank as far as those leagues concerned?
If I had to compare them, I'd compare them to, as I talked about last week, like the English Champion League, where, you know, that second tier from the Premier League. So
Gotcha.
I'd put them in competition with them. But as I mentioned, you know, they're getting more and more of these players from overseas. So it's becoming more common to get these high-profile players in the United States. And a lot of them are coming at the end of their careers, which I don't blame them for. They get a nice paycheck to come play in LA or New York, and you know the level.
Rena, look at Omar's face right now. He just killed his question.
Hey,
I'm sick of this motherfucker.
I am a murderer.
I'm gonna go next because I want to at least ask the question, which is it correlates to that. The David Beckham experiment. They gave him what? 250 million, I think. To
Was that how much they
Yes.
gave?
yeah. Which is he was at the end of his career, and they wanted him to come out here and be an ambassador for soccer, like Wayne Gretzky did for the Kings in LA. Do you think that experiment was successful? If so, why? And same question, if not, why not?
I 100% think that was successful. David Beckham, later in his career, was almost like an icon. You know what I mean? Where he wasn't just this soccer player who was really good and played for these great teams. And
You had to be an icon to get paid $250 million.
No shit. Yeah, no, I definitely think it was successful. It was the first of the MLS's kind of come over here and have that kind of impact on the league. You know, he's got that appeal to him that draws other people than soccer fans. You know, the ladies love him, obviously. Right. So it drew a different kind of audience.
They saw him. I was in traffic on La Cienega and Pico, and crowds started to realize he was driving in the car in front of me. They literally stopped traffic.
Yeah.
And got out their cars and came off the side of the road just to take pictures and run alongside as much as he could.
He's married to a freaking Spice Girl. It's, you know what I mean? He's got the whole media thing going for him, and he just brought a lot to he brought attention.
One of the complaints, though, that I read about for that amount of money is he wasn't as accessible as they wanted him to be, because in Europe, he did what he wanted to do. You know, he didn't have to be accessible. He was who he was. And they wanted him to be more accessible, and he wasn't as much as they thought he should be, especially for that amount of money.
And I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying where, you know, as you mentioned, players come here at the end of their career, and he might have, you know, taken it a little lightly, more lightly than he should have. I'm sure some people were upset by that, which I can understand. You know what I mean? He's maybe not as dedicated to his trade as he should have been, or as he was when he was at Manchester United or Real Madrid. So I think he kind of knew in the back of his mind, like, you know what I mean? Like, I know why they brought me here. I can do what I want.
Right. Come get this check and I'm done.
Yeah.
sit front row at the Laker game.
Yes.
Right.
So, to piggyback off of the Brazilian indoor league, like you said, it's like our N1 out here. Why do you think that something like that wouldn't have got more attention here, since it's something that we can latch onto. It's smaller, faster pace, more moves. Like, that's perfect for like ESPN highlight stuff. Like, why wouldn't have that caught on here?
Because there's different players. It's a different game. You're not going to see the David Beckhams or the Ronaldos, the Ronaldinhos playing these professional football leagues. So there's no star attraction, right? It's more of these kind of players who have been playing the style of soccer for so long that, they're kind of accustomed to this, is what they grew up doing. It is a flashy, fun way, but I think if there were more kind of electrifying players in the different leagues that kind of went to the futsal leagues or the indoor leagues and then kind of drew that attention to them, maybe it would pick up a little bit more. But I think it's the lack of star power.
Okay. Well, again, man, Anthony, we really appreciate you. And when we make it big time, we're definitely going to bring you on as our first guest again. We really appreciate your insight, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, man.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So Kevin had to go sell a house real quick, so he's gone.
It's power of the internet, baby.
But before we get out of here, we want to briefly touch on the NBA playoffs. And I have a specific question I really want to ask you guys, because it's bothering me how terrible these playoffs have turned out to be. The San Antonio Spurs just dusted off the Houston Rockets. They beat them.
Very apt term.
They beat them by 40. But the question I want to put to you guys is, this will be, as Kevin talked about on our last show, this will be the first time in NBA history where the finals will have the same two teams for three consecutive years. What has to happen in the NBA to break up the dominance that's happening right now between the Cavs and the Warriors?
Let me go first. You already jumped in front of me.
You're right.
You're right.
Go ahead.
Les, what am I going to say?
I don't know, but I know what I was going to say.
Scouting.
I think it got to be more than that.
No, but it has to start with that, because these teams
Put my hand back up.
that have been tanking have been getting it wrong, so they get all these high draft picks. They don't actually get any better, and the cream still rises to the top. And those two super teams are well put together, and people are trying to emulate that style of basketball with lesser talent, and it's just not working. So it's easy pickings. Nobody plays their game; they play into their hands.
Okay, Omar.
One, they just need to be patient, because eventually Jerry West will die.
Oh, okay.
I mean, think about it. I truly don't think the NBA needs to do anything, because it's always been.
And when I say the NBA, I don't necessarily mean
teams.
like the league or the organization that is the National Basketball Association. I just mean like the teams involved.
I get it. I'm just saying, like, the NBA has always been a top heavy league. Always has been. 11 teams have won in the last 11 teams have won all the championships in the last 37 years. It's always been a top heavy league, and it always will be. This is the first.
Emotional.
No, it's fine. It's good. This is the first time that this has happened, but
And it hasn't even happened yet. That's what's crazy.
It's happening.
It will.
it's done.
What do you think, Les?
Honestly, I mean, you look at the league now, the way the CBA set up, star players can't move much anymore. So if you really think about it, these young squads, let's say the Minnesotas of the world, even let's say the Lakers, you got to wait it out, or somebody got to get hurt. Because that's the only way it's not going to
have to be patient.
Yeah, you got to be.
You're going to have to be patient, and you have to have a great organization.
So I wouldn't be surprised if they right back there next year.
Kevin sold his house really fast. Kevin, he didn't sell
He's
his
still
house.
selling the house.
He's still selling the house.
Dotting the T's.
Kevin, did you sell the house or not, Kevin?
That's that DocuSign. It works quick.
Listen, man, I got back here for the show. It is what it is.
What do you feel like needs to happen in order to break up the dominance between the Cavs and the Warriors?
I think that the rest of the NBA teams outside of the Warriors and the Cavs should go to Santa Monica and enroll in basketball class that both Ambassador Dad and Skinny took, and really learn the importance of ball movement and defense, because Golden State and Cleveland got it. Everybody else just plays their own game, one-on-one ISO ball, and that's why they're 4 or 5 games in the playoffs and out.
You know what, the thing, and that's what I was looking for, that it's specifically defense. I feel like defense is what would change the dynamic with both the Cavs and the Warriors. And this ties into what you talked about, Les, in terms of the collective bargaining agreement. I think these guys are getting so much money now that it does not matter anymore. It doesn't matter because defense is all about grit. It's all about effort. And you know what? I'm getting $150 million regardless.
So it's
Kyle Lowry,
always going
DeMar DeRozan.
It's going to always come down to the organizations that put the time. You said scouting. Put the time and the money into the coaching, to the GM,
into building.
Yes, and the ancillary part of the organizations that support these players,
right.
And they have to have the will to get rid of these players they know who are not with the program, are not pay these players.
Right.
Well, they have to pay the players. That's in a bargaining agreement.
Look at Sterling, right? All those years he owned the Clippers.
Mm-hmm.
Like he didn't give a shit what product was going out there. He was winning. He was getting money.
Yep.
So I mean, as long as you have capitalism and it's winning, who gives a shit?
I mean,
right?
you have the teams have to pay a certain amount of money every year.
Everything.
They have to spend that money on the cap.
But you can spend the money on 4 really good two-way players, and I'm coming to you, Anthony. You can spend the money on 4 really good two-way players rather than spending on one player that just because he's the top free agent or the top 3 free agent, he doesn't have to get a max deal. Because my prediction is that the NBA is going to eat itself in the same way that ESPN is paying the piper. I feel like if there isn't a change in the spending habits of these teams and they don't start to find a way to hold these players more accountable, the product is going to continue to be watered down. And eventually, it's nice that we get to see Cleveland and Golden State again. And hopefully it's a good series. But if this keeps happening, it's gonna be a different, because this is not like the Celtics and the Lakers in the '80s where there were still 5 or 6 other good teams.
Yeah. And they had to battle to get there.
They had to battle to get there. This is something completely different. What were you gonna say, Anthony?
It's almost frustrating. Everything you guys are saying, I agree with, and everything you guys are saying, the Knicks do the opposite of. They look for that quick fix. They overpay. You guys got it though.
And it's
Isaiah
nothing.
Thomas.
Once you get into that muck of the quick fix, you stuck.
Yep.
Yeah.
You stuck in the 7th, 8th seed, knocked out in the first round.
I'm a diehard Lakers fan, but Philadelphia, this is a clarion call to you. Don't pay Kyle Lowry $150 million.
Denver,
You will regret
Denver,
it.
please don't pay. No, matter of fact, Denver pay him $150
Give up that money, Denver. Denver, give up that money.
Why don't we try relegation?
And on that note, we'll head out of here. We thank you for visiting with us here at Confirmation Bias. Followed us everywhere at social media at The League AM. Thank you again, Anthony. Golf clap for you, sir. And we will see you next time. Hit us up on social media or visit our website to let us know if your bias was confirmed.